Hello everybody and welcome back to Let's Play Suzerain. Sorry it has been a little while since the last part. Combination of me trying to figure out if I have fixed the crashing issue with Victoria 3. So far don't seem to have any luck with that, so that series is probably going to be getting the axe, unfortunately. And then the other thing was being hit by a hurricane and losing power for a week. So yeah, that's fun. So yeah, we are picking up where we left off. It looks like the game did not save the newspaper reading progress, so let's go ahead and click through all of these just so that it marks them as read. There we go. Presumably that also includes all these little reports as well. Not sure if we went through all of these little reports. We might not have. Let's see. The mayor of Morna has reported that their industrial output numbers this year are 12% lower than last year. That's not great. According to current predictions, they're set to lose an additional 2% of industrial output next year. This sounds vaguely familiar. I feel like we did read this, so we probably read all the little reports as well last part. I don't recall if we did, because it's been so long. Yeah, I think we did. That the ATO pledging assistance to Agnolia sounds very familiar. So okay, yeah, I think we did read through all these little reports. So okay, the only thing left to do then is a presidential visit to Narbel. I was traveling to the snow-covered city of Narbel in the Nargis region for the World Development Forum organized by the Ministry of Health and the Ministry of Education. The mountainous city of Narbel had gritty tones to it. It was mostly regarded as one of the poorer cities in Sordland. Its people were hardy and wary. Even after the discovery of natural resources in the area, years of neglect by the central government were apparent on the buildings and the general infrastructure. Natural resources, namely gas and oil, were now under the control of Gazprom, which elevated the corporation to a place of power. My task in this forum was mainly symbolic: fake smiles and handshakes with oil barons, meeting with local politicians, but most importantly of all, making sure that Narbel did not feel like it was forgotten by the government. The scenery so far, however, was a reflection of Narbel's neglect. Main roads of the city were not maintained well. There were many bumps and empty, discolored spots in the asphalt. Navigating and swerving to avoid the inconveniences, our motorcade finally started nearing the city. As if my discomfort from the bumpy road was apparent to him, Sergei rolled down the partition window. "We will be arriving at Hotel West in a few minutes, sir." Thank you for letting me know. Anytime, it is my duty. After a moment, Sergei started to smile under his mustache. "How is life, Sergei?" "Sir, I just want to say it has been great these last 2 months. As you know, my wife Susan recently gave birth to our son, sir, and now my daughter just started at a very good high school in Holsword." "That's great news, Sergei. I'm happy for you." "I appreciate it, sir. Truly. I was worried that I wouldn't be able to afford a good private school if she scored less in the entrance exams. But I shouldn't have made my insecurity get to me. Erica outsmarts me all the time. I'm very proud to have a daughter like her." "I also hope that Deanna will grow to be like her mother someday." "I'm sure she will, sir. After all, she's the daughter of a lion and a lioness." "My daughter looks up to the First Lady for inspiration, and it's not just limited to my daughter, sir. She's an inspiration for almost all women in the country. But at the same time, it must be hard for the First Lady as well. All this attention, adjusting to this new high-profile life, and a husband that has great responsibility." "You're right, it is hard for her." "It must be, sir. We sometimes forget the important people in life between all the responsibility and rush. You know, those we care for." I agree. Sergei continued after a moment of silence. Have I told you, sir? We named my son George. The doctor said he is very healthy, and thankfully so is my wife. Tell me more about Susan. What kind of person is she? She has a good heart. Her family comes from Sarna, so they are a little more traditional. She's beautiful, of course, but what I really admire is her selflessness. Selflessness is a respectable trait to have. It should be mutual. That is what matters most. Sergei sighed. I've already started thinking about their university education, especially Erica. I want to send her to a good private school, but with the current state of the economy, it's going to be hard for us. See, so we can dump the rest of our personal wealth into Sergei's family's education and whatnot. And then any other extra expenses you need, whatever exactly that means. Or we can, just say we'll support the education of your children and, we only lose one personal wealth instead. I'm honestly not quite sure what the pros and cons necessarily are of giving Sergei money. I assume, particularly if you end up with a bad ending, it may have benefits. If you get a bad ending, maybe if you've given him money in the past up to a certain threshold, he'll help you escape or something like that. I don't know. But I imagine it's probably something like that. And honestly, you know what, Sergei? I can support the education of your children. Mr. President, there's no way I can. With one look from me, Sergei cut his sentence short and nodded at me after removing his hat. Mr. President, I don't know how I can ever repay you for this. Thank you so much. Well, Sergei, I hope you return the favor by helping someone in need someday, just like I did. I will, sir, of course. I won't forget your generosity, sir. The car hit a major pothole and a bump which lifted us up in our seats for a second. Are you fine? Yes, sir. I hope the car is fine, too. The motorcade began approaching the hotel. The Hotel West was supposedly the best hotel in Narbel. The large 25-story main building was undoubtedly one of the taller and more expensive buildings in the city. It towered over the nearby slums and had been a target for protests when it was first built. A crowd was gathered in front of the hotel with the welcoming committee at its center. As we approached the red-carpeted entrance, I could see the mayor of Narbel and his top aides. Sergei got out of the car and opened the door. He bowed his head respectfully and gestured towards the entrance. Thank you. Have a good day, Mr. President. As soon as I left the vehicle, the fresh air of Narbel filled my lungs. Almost immediately, everyone present in the crowd flocked over to me with an excessive display of curiosity, smiles and handshakes while I donned the mask of a politician. A mask that I was very used to. Okay, personal wealth decreased as a result of that. What do we got over here? PJFP report on the reforms. Franz Richter outlines that without the implementation of term limits and limited decrees, it would be very difficult for him and his party to stand behind the reform package. That's fine. Largely agree with both of those. Young Sword suspected of a terror attack in Vesord. You guys are ruining things for yourselves. What do we got here in the newspaper? Protests appear calmer. Nationwide protests persist, albeit with a slight reprieve in tensions across some cities. Isolated incidents of violence were reported on Monday night in a few major cities, notably Deer and Lockhaven, amidst the prevailing unrest. In Deer, the hometown of the revered Circus, a massive memorial march saw tens of thousands of citizens taking to the streets in peaceful remembrance. However, as dusk fell and the crowd began to dwindle, there were instances of discord. Authorities reported that a fraction of demonstrators resorted to hurling stones and disregarding orders to disperse, prompting police action and resulting in arrests. Elsewhere, the protests in Holsword and the majority of other significant urban centers seem to present a calmer facade, exhibiting fewer confrontations between civilians and law enforcement. As per data from the state press, the authorities have made approximately 9,800 arrests nationwide in connection to the ongoing protests. Yet as we observe the unfolding situation, it is crucial to remain vigilant and steadfast in our pursuit of peace and stability in these challenging times. Education privatization proven successful in Lisbia. Yeah, not quite sure if we want to go that route. It's certainly not relying on privatization necessarily. Sol needs to answer for his crimes. I do not have a problem with that. Shocking misogynist rally. We were appalled again when yesterday during a protest by the Swedish League of Women, counter-protesters showed up to disrupt the peaceful rally. In the resulting scuffle between the police, the protesters, and the mob, many were arrested from both sides. Labor Union Rights March. Let's see. A large group of labor union members gathered around the city of Valgan to protest against the poor condition of worker rights in Sordland. People could be seen holding signs, pleading for accountability and basic rights in corporate work environments. Blah, 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 blah. Look at how great the rights are in Vogsland, minimum wage, overtime pay, and safe working regulations. The time for real workers' reform is now, one voice demanded with frustration. We had the opportunity to interview some open-minded managers from corporations. They relayed that the companies have little to no oversight. Okay. Back over here. Briefing on the current welfare situation. I arrived in the meeting room for my talk with Ciara and Pascal. Before beginning, I took a moment to appreciate the view from the balcony. The mountains of Narbel were completely covered with snow. While I was mesmerized by the scenery, Pascal Benewol walked up to me. My Minister of Health was, ironically, somewhat portly, having gained a few pounds since his breakthrough as a best-selling writer, but his authority on social affairs could not be questioned. Such a spectacular view. Ciara Walda, the Minister of Education, joined us on the balcony dressed in a sky blue pantsuit. Her preference for trousers over dresses had made her the subject of much palace gossip, but it didn't seem to bother her in the slightest. Spectacular indeed, but if you look in the opposite direction, you will see what Sol's decades have neglected to the city. Most of the people living in Narbel are workers, farmers, and their wives and children. They're breaking their backs for close to no pay, all thanks to greedy corporations. My intention is to help the working class. I'm glad we see eye to eye on the issue. If you look past the view, you can see the real problems like poverty. Pascal nodded gravely. This was a subject he knew quite a bit about himself. His best-known books were about the plight of Sordland's less fortunate, drawn from his own past growing up in squalor. Well put, Miss Walda. I don't need to tell you about my own experiences with poverty. I'm sure you have similar stories, am I right, Mr. President? If I recall correctly, we chose to grow up in a middle-class family, I believe. I don't recall. It's been so long now. I think we chose a middle-class family. I'll say thankfully we never had any problems with money. You know the saying, you don't know what you have until it is taken from you. You don't have to have been born poor to sympathize with the plight of the impoverished, which as you don't have to have been born a woman to recognize Sordland's need for parity among the sexes. Parity among the sexes shouldn't be our first priority. Look at how many high-ranking female politicians our country has. Appearances can be deceiving, Pascal. Her voice sounded bitter. I think about how Lilith Graf got to her current position. I don't necessarily believe the rumors about her and Sol, but she never could have risen so high if she didn't parrot his cause. Gloria Tori is an accident that the first female or is it an accident that the first female assembly speaker is such a staunch conservative? And then there was Alfonso's habit of promoting women to prominent positions to give Sordland a progressive sheen while accomplishing nothing in reality. While women in places like Narbel are denied any opportunity to advance, the government could use a handful of female politicians from wealthy families, myself included, to pretend their only obstacle to success is their lack of initiative. Meanwhile, those of us who don't use our clout to help powerful men stay in power are denigrated as angry spinsters, I ask you, Mr. President, does anyone care that your strategist, Mr. Galdi, doesn't have a wife? Let's see. I agree with you completely. Sordland's women deserve better. I'm glad to hear that. As I was saying, isn't it about time Holsard addressed this country's real issues rather than bowing to the wishes of the hawks and fearmongers in the establishment and diverting yet more resources to the military and law enforcement? Our welfare, healthcare, and education systems have been decaying since the recession. Sordland's poorer communities are losing hope. Hopelessness and a lack of opportunities can drive people to extreme solutions. We're seeing increased crime, domestic violence, and yes, rising inequality between men and women. Let's see. I mean, to an extent, they're all kind of true. Issues, a lot of these issues need to be tackled from different directions, so you can't necessarily use, one solution to fix them all. At least not completely. You might have one thing that will work for multiple different things to some extent, but it won't necessarily resolve every issue on its own. Admittedly, stopping the recession would probably help quite a bit with a lot of that. The capital must be prioritized the resources that matter the most, which is probably not the friendliest thing to say necessarily in this situation, even if it is in many ways true. But I think those issues must be tackled from different directions. We need to engage it holistically. I'm planning to help by using an increased budget to improve the quality of healthcare. That could prove useful, but we need to be doing a lot more. Education has similar issues. There is another subject I want to mention. I've been working on improving the rights of workers in our country, and have proposed a draft bill that is currently being reviewed by our party. Mr. Clavin has already backed me and given his support. Sordland has fallen behind most countries on this subject, and it is my responsibility to ensure this is not the case. There's always room for improvement, and it is good to hear that you're pushing for it. Appreciate the kind words, Mr. President. I will not let you down. It is also a matter of life and death. Every decade we hear of some horrific accident due to employers' disregard for their workers' safety. So, will you back the bill when it arrives on your desk, Mr. President? I mean, realistically, I would probably say 1 and 2. I would be very interested in supporting it once it's finished. However, to make a decision, I would need to evaluate the contents in detail. Yeah. I would be very interested in supporting it once it is finished. I'm relieved to hear that. He smiled. It's getting a little cold out here. Shall we continue our discussion indoors? We headed back inside. The meeting room was already prepared for state business. Small gifts for each of us had been placed on the table by the municipality. We took our seats. Well, let's start with your health overview, Pascal. As you wish, Mr. President. Sordland has a free healthcare system except for a few private hospitals operating under it. Most of the populace receives adequate treatment. Health issues primarily appear in rural areas due to a lack of quality services. I'm doing my best to ensure that citizens of all ages receive the best healthcare they can. I also personally want to solve our high infant and maternal mortality problem. How many doctors and nurses are employed? We have 31,594 doctors and 73,680 nurses working for the Ministry of Health. This is a high number. What I think is, I don't want to be rude, but out of those numbers, how many are in urban and in rural areas? Oh, that's a good point, Ciara. Pascal? The data shows that per 10,000 people in urban areas, there are about 11 doctors, while in rural areas, there are only 3. In other words, rural citizens with medical emergencies have to wait an embarrassing long time before they are treated. Well, the rural areas also presumably have lower populations as well, and thus potentially have less instances of a bunch of people coming in for medical emergencies. So in theory, they probably aren't having significantly longer wait times. However, the quality of the care may still be significantly less compared to in the cities. How many hospital beds are there per 10,000 citizens? There are 10 beds per 10,000 citizens compared to most of our neighbors. This is a very good number. Our amount of beds is higher than the countries of Agnolia and Wayland, but we obviously can't match Lispia or Volgsland. Agnolia and Wayland should hardly be used as a standard, but it is good to know we aren't in a massive health crisis yet. What's the life expectancy and mortality rates? Our life expectancy is 65 years. The infant mortality rate is a worrying 121 per 1,000 births, while our maternal mortality is 5 per 1,000. I assure you that we are doing everything we can to save mothers and their newborns. Those numbers are saddening indeed. I agree, we must do everything we can. We're working very hard at improving the quality of the services. Thank you, Pascal. Your in-depth briefing is much appreciated. Want to hear about the education system? With pleasure. Swordfish education is free, but we have a very outdated system that I want to reform. The other important issue is the lack of access to education in rural areas, especially for young girls. Your administration has the power to solve both problems. My highest priority is to get enough funding to be able to build schools in rural areas while I cleanse our educational system of its nationalistic indoctrination and sexist teachings. How many students and teachers do we have? Currently, there are about 5 million students, 3 million in primary education, 1 million in secondary, and 1 million in tertiary. There are 155,316 teachers. Sordland is full of young and bright minds. We should keep striving to make education available for all. I think there needs to be a change in what is being taught. We should help children to ask questions and educate themselves. What is the literacy rate of Sordland? The literacy rate of Sordland is at 80%. This is a very good indicator for future growth, but it needs to increase. It's also far lower among girls and boys. If I remember correctly, the most illiterate areas are Bergia and Agland. That is correct, although Lackhaven skews the statistics for the Nargis region, which also has a vast number of illiterate citizens. This underlines my point about the lack of access to education. Tell me about the differences between urban and rural education. Urban areas have 3 times the numbers of schools per 10,000 people compared to rural areas. Rural areas also suffer from a lack of teachers. I can imagine teachers not preferring desolate areas. Salaries for teachers are very low here. We need to increase their pay to give them more incentive. Thank you, Ciara. I can fill in the blanks from here. I believe that is everything. Ciara stood up and moved towards the window. She took a deep breath. What is it, Ciara? Look at this impoverished city. The streets full of potholes, the hospital barely functioning, the school half open. This is not just about Sol or even Alfonso failing. This decay in Sordland's forgotten regions has been going on for many decades due to structural corruption, which is fueled by capitalism. Let's see. We're here to change that trend and to provide for the people. But that remains to be seen. I'm working on the new education system and your support would be welcome. Ciara sat back down and sighed. One way or another, we need to change in Sordland. Greed and unchecked capitalism will not magically provide for the people. Tell me about your plans, Ciara. My plans require an increase in the government budget. I would aim to solve the problems that we highlighted with the allocated money. By building schools in these less fortunate rural areas and through fundamental changes to the education system, I will unlock the full potential of all our children, boys and girls alike. Our education mandate was to improve education. We will deliver on this. This brings hope to the table, which needs to be followed by action. There is much to be done, but if we're given the budget, we can implement policies that push education to the next level. Wouldn't a promotion of private education help create additional funds? Yes, but at what cost? I'm not a supporter of the private sector in education. At the end of the day, they are focused on profit first. What are you working towards, Pascal? I personally want to improve the low quality of healthcare in the rural areas, so I created draft plans to increase the salary of doctors and to upgrade the equipment of the hospitals. I can only do Or I can do more with an increased budget. Additionally, a privatization plan to promote private investments in the healthcare system could allocate extra funds. Isn't access to healthcare in rural areas an issue? Access is an issue, but not as critical as improving the quality in these areas. The lack of experienced personnel and equipment causes poor treatment, resulting in many deaths. I do hope to create competition and increase the quality of healthcare with the privatization effort. But you must realize that privatizing our healthcare system would increase the price of treatment and make access worse for the average citizen. The decision to not promote more state control would cost these Swordish people dearly. My expectation from our government is that we understand and focus on the needs of the people. We are elected representatives of our people, and we will prioritize their needs. That's reassuring to hear. I don't want to sound cynical, but almost all governments keep making the same promises. We must show we are different through our actions. Did we cover all the necessary subjects? One more thing I wish to raise my concerns about: your scheduled meeting with the GASOM chairman and former president, Mr. Alfonso. By negotiating with Alfonso and his company, you have an opportunity to secure better labor conditions for blue-collar GASOM employees. This could be a triumph for all of Narbel. What is there to negotiate, Pascal? The standards of GASOM workers are already at rock bottom. President Rain can and must demand better. Nevertheless, it is worth acknowledging the corporation's significant contribution to job creation in Narbel and other poverty-stricken regions. Persuading the chairman to make concessions might prove to be a formidable task. Let's see. If we do this right, we can find a solution that advances both the economy and the interests of laborers. That would be quite the impressive feat. You'd make headlines for it. This matter is close to my heart. I would personally be grateful if you were able to resolve the concerns raised by Katrina Horton and her fellow labor representatives. It would be difficult to imagine a CEO like Alfonso giving benefits to workers without him personally gaining from it. Let's see. GASOM relies on us just as we rely on them. We can find a path to compromise. The middle way often sways perilously close to the status quo. We must ensure that any negotiations genuinely benefit the people and not just uphold the interests of corporate giants. Thank you for your input, Ciara, but I will stress to President Rain how important it is that the door to dialogue remain open. Ideology should never be in the way of bringing about tangible, lasting change. Let's see. I'm encouraged by the willingness of Mr. Manager and Mr. Alfonso to meet with me. It's a step forward. We shall keep you no longer. Thank you both for the discussions. I do hope we won't repeat the same mistakes again and again. Have a good day, Mr. President. The ministers left and I prepared to leave for other official business in the city. The GASOM meeting was just one of the many events I was scheduled to attend over the next few days. As I made my way up, the weather was noticeably cold, but it didn't keep a group of USP supporters from coming out to cheer us on the streets. By looking at the citizens' attire, it was easy to understand the current state of Narbel. Some people were wearing clothes a few sizes too large. Some kids did not even have shoes, yet there was hope in their eyes. They were excited to see their president in their city. Let's see. Ooh, young swords member found decapitated. Damn. Let's see. Okay. Workers' Rights Bill nears completion. Proposed by Albin Clavin and supported by Minister of Health Pascal Benawal, is being prepared for the first draft review. Voices from the labor union showed strong signs of support. A session dedicated to the bill in the assembly proved contentious. The people that form the backbone of the Swordfish economy will finally be fully protected by extensive laws, Katrina Horton said, receiving both cheers and boos. NFP on the reforms. He specifically emphasized that he would, Let's see. He's completely against any threshold reform. He specifically emphasized that this would lead to unwanted elements entering the assembly and that he is outright against any changes to the 10% threshold. No thanks. I don't really care about the NFP support. A repeal of the Energy Protection Law of 1932 fails. The proposed repeal of the Energy Protection Act of 1932 was put to vote in the Assembly today, resulting in its defeat, despite strong advocacy from the reformer factions of PFJP and beyond, including within the USP under Alban Clavin. The majority of the Assembly, led by the USP and NFP, voted against the repeal, 179 to 71. Consequently, the Energy Protection Act of 1932 remains in force, maintaining the status quo of foreign ownership restrictions of energy companies in Sordland. This result concludes the current attempt to modify the foreign ownership requirement or foreign ownership regulations, but does not preclude further legislative efforts or any initiative by the executive. Mine disaster in Morbel, current death toll at 82 and counting. See, preserving national sovereignty, the EPA stands for now. Yep, okay. That's not really adding anything new to the discussion there. CSP leaders discuss Heligoland at Helm Summit. Okay, this one seems pretty important because Heligoland is going to be, it's going to come up a fair bit. In a pivotal meeting conveyed in Helium, leaders of the CSP have gathered to discuss the intricate issues of Heligoland's sovereignty, a matter tinged with historical complexity. The Assembly recalled the 1920s Agnolian annexation of the island during Vogsland's revolution, underscoring their commitment to address past missteps and ensure a future that respects the rights and aspirations of the island's inhabitants. The summit was also a testament to the CSP's adept navigation in an ever-evolving geopolitical landscape marked by the capitalist influence of the ATO. Emphasizing the importance of dialogue and cooperation, CSP leaders reiterated their determination to avoid escalation in an already delicate situation. Moreover, they confirmed the existence of prepared contingency plans, ensuring that Vogsland, as a key member of the CSP, would receive unwavering support if the need arises. The summit concluded on a note of shared resolve, with CSP leaders collectively affirming their dedication to preserving peace and stability even amidst the challenging dynamics presented by the Heligon Island situation. Oh, here it is. I'm like, where is it? Arcasia builds a military base in Lispia. Ooh, that's important. President Walker visited Lispia last week to engage in talks with Prime Minister Alvarez concerning the establishment of Arcasian military bases within Lispia. Following the conclusion of the discussions, an agreement was reached between the two leaders regarding a significant military defense investment in Lispia. As part of the agreement, a large military base will be constructed on Ravnos Island. The base will be equipped with Arcasian radar and anti-air systems for enhanced security. Additionally, Arcasian plans to deploy a dozen M3 ballistic missiles. The base is expected to accommodate approximately 200 strategic bombers and jet fighters, along with an estimated 20,000 Arcasian soldiers. 200 strategic bombers and jet fighters, assuming that that's actually the combined total, really feels like it's not a whole lot. I feel like that's a pretty small base, but maybe that's just me. I'm just trying to think, and it just seems small, unless it's 200 strategic bombers and 200 fighters, not just 200 in total across the two different, aircraft type. But they'll be going right over here. It's a small little island. It's bigger than these over here, but it's a small little island. Heligoland is right over here, quite a bit larger. Okay, let's go back to the national map. I think I'm going to go ahead and end this part here. I've got about 11 minutes left on the clock right now. But I feel like it's probably best to just end this one here instead of continuing on, because it'll go quite long, I think, if I just continue on from here. So we're going to end this part here. I will see you all next time. Until then, goodbye and farewell.